Are you a high-performing parent, entrepreneur, or high achiever in pursuit of excellence? Welcome to The Nexus Podcast, a podcast custom tailored for families like ours, driven, affluent, and eager to lead extraordinary lives. From rockstar stay-at-home moms to high-producing CEOs, we choose to model success for everyone we are surrounded by. We prioritize health over sickness, embrace a vitalistic lifestyle, and seek to tap into the limitless potential that God has bestowed upon us. I'm Dr. Daniel Kimbley, your host, and on this podcast, we'll uncover the secrets to living a fulfilling and abundant life, where you and your loved ones can thrive physically, mentally, and spiritually. Together, we'll forge a path to greatness and unleash your God-given capabilities. Get ready to say yes to a life of true prosperity and well-being. This is The Nexus Podcast. What is up, you guys? Welcome back. And this week, we're going to talk about my daughter's birthday party. And there's a very specific reason I want to talk about her birthday party. And that reason is this, it's simple. Is because this literally happened on Saturday, when we were at the party, one of the things that went down in my head is I started thinking about, man, when I was a kid, right, versus kids today. When I was a kid, I remember we had games like Pin the Tail on the Donkey, and we had games like Bobbing for Apples, and, you know, there was even like the game where you would like hold the spoon and then you would carry the egg on the end of the spoon and you had to balance it. So there were all these games that we used to play that I can remember playing. There was even a game where we took like a playing card and you would suction it and then you would like basically pass it to the person next to you. But if the card fell down, then you would like touch lips. So the reason I bring up this weird thought, right, is because it actually made me think of Bobbing for Apples and how much I remember having so much joy and playing Bobbing for Apples as a kid. And today, we live in this society where, you know, we're told that germs are bad and germs are dangerous and germs are what make us sick and we can't spread each other's germs and we can't get germs on each other and we definitely can't touch each other and we need to wash our hands after everything and we need lots of hand sanitizer. And like, there's all these places where we don't do things like we used to, but then when we look at the statistics like of what kids are experiencing today, we know that nearly 50% of kiddos under the age of 16 in the United States are diagnosed with some kind of chronic illness. And so this leads me to this conversation and this thought of the immune system, specifically with regards to games like Bobbing for Apples, which we did not do at Coco's birthday party because I believe that most families probably wouldn't have participated just because they think about their bodies a certain way. And I think we've been trained to think about our bodies a certain way. Now, I'm going to preface the conversation that I'm going to have with you is that you're probably going to want to just hit pause, turn off the podcast right now if you do not agree with me on the fact that God designed your body to heal on its own. You are the only best healer. Your system has a very innate wisdom given to you by God that knows how to heal, knows when to have a fever, when to have a stuffy nose, when to quote unquote get sick, even though I would not argue it's getting sick at all. It's actually your body's expression of health, doing exactly what your body was designed to do when there's times of an overgrowth of bacteria or an overgrowth or an onslaught of viruses coming into your system that your body can't control on its own. So we ramp up a bigger immune response, which creates the fever and the stuffy nose and the cough, etc. The list could go on and on and on. So if you don't agree with me on that your body knows how to heal itself, you can go ahead and turn this off because everything I say from here on out is probably just going to frustrate you. You're going to disagree with it. My intent is not to frustrate, but to share this idea of why Bobbing for Apples I think is such a good thing. And this question comes up a lot around this time of year, right after Halloween, right before Thanksgiving. And the reason the question comes up is because so many families that I work with in particular ask me the question of how do you keep your kiddo so healthy, or how do my kids stay so healthy? Or on the other end, it's like, why does my kid, you know, it's been 6 months now and we're just chronically sick. We got sick again. Now we have this cough. Now we have COVID. And the list goes on and on and on, right? And so the idea is that there are two ways to think about our bodies. There are two ways to think about how our systems work. The first way to think about it is this concept of an idea called germ theory. And what germ theory would state, quite simply, is this, is that germs make us sick. Bacteria and viruses make us sick, so we must avoid them at all costs. We must avoid them. So that's one way to think about our bodies. That's one way to think about this concept of a game like Bobbing for Apples, which we don't do anymore because of quote unquote germs. So there's this idea of germ theory. Germs make us sick. If we avoid germs, then we don't get sick. The other side of that equation is much more of a terrain theory. And so what terrain theory would say is that bacteria and viruses can only afflict our systems if they overgrow in an amount that our body cannot handle on its own, in which we must mount this big, huge immune response in order to deal with that threat inside of our systems more effectively. So here's what's interesting about those two approaches, those two thought processes, right? Is that we know that we are constantly surrounded by germs. We actually know, if you look in Guyton's medical textbook of physiology, which is like the gold standard for looking at the body physiologically, in any medical profession, not just chiropractic, but like MDs, like everybody uses the Guyton's medical textbook of physiology. So what Guyton's textbook of physiology says is that our bodies actually have more bacterial cells just in our gut than we do human cells in our entire body. Meaning that if you think about this, think about it critically, is like if germs made us sick, why do we have so many germs inside of our digestive system? Well, we have so many germs inside of our digestive system to help us break down food because it actually helps modulate our immune system. Those germs aren't bad, they're actually great, which is why when we see families who take rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics, they're sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker every time. And when they stop that cycle, their body actually starts to express health even more, where they don't get sick as often, they don't get the stuffy nose, they don't have the asthma, the allergies go away, like all kinds of things can happen when we start to restore the growth of good, healthy gut bacteria inside of our bodies. So again, I just bring this up to say that, there's germ theory and there's terrain theory. Germ theory would say that germs are bad, we must avoid them. Think about something like hand sanitizer. We put hand sanitizer on our hands to kill off the bacteria, but what we forget often is that one of the things that we have on our bacteria, or in our hands right now, is good, healthy bacteria. That good, healthy bacteria on our skin, on our bodies, is a first line of defense. Those bacteria can fight other bad pathogens. And so if we kill off the good bacteria, that has nowhere else, like we don't have any first line of defense, so we go into second line, and we're already letting the bad pathogens or the bad bacteria or whatever it is start to immediately get one step ahead in our defense mechanisms, in our defense system. So if germs were the killer, like we would all be dead, because we know that there are tons of germs in the environment. They're unavoidable. They're everywhere. Viruses actually help us write and code certain things within our DNA. Like one simple example of this, I heard Zach Bush talk about this, which I think is so interesting, is that one strand of the HIV virus is the same strand of virus that helped encode our genetics for women to be able to create a placenta. So without the HIV virus or one of its family members, women wouldn't be able to have a placenta, create a placenta. And so like there's this God-given design, right? We were meant to be very closely, intricately bound with nature, with bacteria, with viruses, because they help our bodies actually express health. This is why it's so important for people to be outside. This is why it's so important for people to be in the sunlight. This is why it's so important for kids to be able to dig and play in the dirt and get dirty and like get exposure, because the more exposure they get, the more they build up their terrain. So on the other side of this is terrain theory. And terrain theory simply says, like I shared before, is that if our internal environment is strong and we make certain decisions to allow our internal environment to be strong, then the bacteria and viruses won't affect us the way that they could in normal circumstances if we try to avoid bacteria, if we try to keep ourselves hiding away. So how do we build up our terrain? Well, one, I would argue first and foremost is making sure that you have a healthy functioning nervous system. Your brain modulates what happens with your immune system. If your body is in a fight or flight state, we actually turn off parts of the immune system because we want to focus on blood sugar, because we want to focus on inflammation. We want to focus on things other than trying to fight off bacteria and viruses, because we need to just be able to fight or run away. So that's number one. Number two is making sure that you have a healthy functioning brain and nervous system, which is, by the way, what we do at Nexus Family Chiropractic. Shameless plug. Number two, what you could do is, if you want to build up the terrain of your body, is you can start making different decisions with your food. We know that every single time we eat sugar creates insulin resistance within our bodies, right? So we literally have a response where we spike our blood sugar, and our brain, because our body's infinitely smart, remember, your body's infinitely designed, and so intelligently, right? It has an innate intelligence. So your body works in a series of priorities. So if we have high blood sugar because we ate sugar, then the first thing the body's going to do is say, hey, we need to pause in the immune system. Let's go deal with the blood sugar. Then we'll go back to the immune system. And so, a lot of times what we see, people always ask, why is it flu season right now? Why, from October, literally from the middle or end of October to all the way through the Super Bowl, you could even argue Valentine's Day is flu season. But the reason it's flu season is for one reason, and I've talked about this on multiple episodes of the podcast, and it's simple. It's that if your Halloween eating tons of sugar right before as well. Then we have Halloween candy that lasts us through until Thanksgiving. Then we have Thanksgiving where we have guests visiting. We have the stress of people staying at our house. We probably have the stress of travel. And then we add on top of that all the desserts, all the sweets, all the bad food. For a lot of us adults, it's like more alcohol than normal. That leads us right into Christmas where we do the exact same thing over again. And then we go New Year's, we do the same thing over again. And then we go to the Super Bowl and we do the same thing over again. And then we do Valentine's Day, we do the same thing over again. It's like there's this onslaught in our bodies of eating crap, of treating our bodies like garbage disposal that creates the environment, that creates the terrain for bacteria and viruses to be able to take over and make us more susceptible. So just simply eating clean, like avoiding sugar and what kind of sugar you're eating and making sure you're taking necessary precautions to eat cleaner during this time of year instead of treating your body like a garbage disposal, which I know, like, I'm in the same boat too, right? I like to eat sweets. Luckily my wife makes like healthy stuff so we can eat that instead of indulging in crap that we know is going to negatively affect our immune system. And so the reality is like, this is what it comes down to, is bobbing for apples and things like that. I think we've gotten away from, right? And I'm not saying we should go back to it. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff in it. I just remember having a joy from it when I was a kid. And when I talk to more people that are my age, they're like, oh yeah, we don't even do that anymore, right? And like, even though the idea of bobbing for apples and like other kids spit and slobber sounds kind of gross, we're also we're building our immune system because we're in contact with more bacteria. And I think this is one of the biggest pieces of all of it is we have been told that we need to avoid other people. We need to stay home. We need to not go outside. We need to lock ourselves inside. We need to sanitize everything. But when we do that, we kill off the good and the bad bacteria. When we do that, we're actually preventing our bodies from expressing itself the way that it needs to. And the way that it needs to, the way that it builds itself is actually by being in connection with nature, in connection with other people. They did this super interesting study where they took patients, and what they did is they basically infected them with I can't remember if it was the flu or with the cold, but they infected them with a virus. And what they did is they basically had them, one group of people, they just like quarantined them away. The other group of people, they had them give 7 to 8 hugs a day to different people. And guess who got better faster? Like 75% reduction in symptomatology from the group who was giving hugs to other people. Why? Because connection to other people boosts oxytocin. It boosts our immune system, but it also created more exposure to more bacteria to actually allow that person's terrain to be stronger, to fend itself off from the thing that they were infected with. And so like there's this idea, right, is that we need to avoid. It's germ theory. The reality is, it's like you're never going to avoid germs. Like, it's just not possible. They're in the air that we breathe. They're in the water that we drink. They're in the food that we eat. They're in the dirt that we walk on. Like, bacteria and viruses are all around us all the time. It's part of what connects us to nature. It's literally our internal and external connection to nature. We think of ourselves as separate, but really we're not. And so then there's this idea of terrain theory where you can start to build up and strengthen your immune system. And I truly, at the heart, like at my core, I know that if we started to honor our immune system, if we started to honor our bodies, if we started to understand this idea of terrain theory, and we started to really build up our terrain within our systems, having healthy functioning nervous system, eating clean, connecting more to nature, connecting more to other people, then like literally life would be different, and we wouldn't have 52%, 57%, 60% of kids diagnosed with chronic illness under the age of 16 years old in the United States. And it all starts with the biome. It all starts with how well our body is working on its own in connection with nature. And this is all the intelligence that God gave our system. So my friends, I ask you, is like, are you the person? Are you the family? Do you have the kid? Do you have friends who are the constantly sick kid? They bring everything home from school. The reality is like, it doesn't have to be that way. And the reason it doesn't have to be that way is because when you start to understand terrain theory and you start to ignore this idea of germ theory, you can literally start to build up a healthier, happier, stronger version of your kiddos, of yourselves, that will express more health, that will express more vitality, that will be healthier in the long term, that will need less medications. And this is like one of the most important things I could share with you. So this thought at Coco's birthday party, right? I'm thinking about bobbing for apples. And I'm just thinking about how far we've come from when I was kids, and why I was a kid and when you were a kid. And I don't think it's necessarily the best thing. I would love to see Coco bob for apples. I'm sure she would be stoked to do it if we showed her how to do it. Unfortunately, we just don't live in that kind of society. So that's what I have for you this week. Consider thinking about the fact that germ theory is only one way to think about it. You're going to be pumped this in the news over the next few months. this is how it always goes. You can also start to consider terrain theory, that your body can function without a medication. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. If you do have a fever, if you do have a stuffy nose, if you do have a cough, and if we try to limit those things and turn them off, it's actually going to make our symptoms stick around for longer. So my friends, I love you. I appreciate you. I'll come at you again next week. Peace.